Joining me now is the brave and bold Liberal Senator for South Australia, Alex Antic. Alex, thanks for your time. The pandemic is all but over. We've learned to live with this virus, but Daniel Andrews is still clinging to these draconian restrictions.
Yeah, Rita, it's extraordinary, really, isn't it? I mean, this is a bit like Lieutenant Hiroto Inoue from the Japanese Imperial Army being dragged out of the caves in the Pacific Islands in 1975. The war was over. The war was over, Dan, and that applies to private and public health mandates. There was never a case for these mandates, Rita. We know that. There was never any case for this transmission angle. It didn't do anything. It didn't stop transmission. And yet all of these bodies pushed on. Well, that was extraordinary this time last year, in my view, when that was clear. It's even more extraordinary now. This has got to stop. Absolutely got to stop, and it's got to stop today.
Well, let's hope he hears you. Now, I want to ask you about the Essendon Saga, religious freedom and expression under threat more than ever in Australia. This is just shocking stuff. Andrew Thorburn has a strong case for unlawful dismissal, if you ask me. I'm no lawyer, but just having a look at what some of the employment law experts are saying, he basically was asked, Alex, to choose between his job and his role as chair of his church group.
Yeah, it's absolutely outrageous, and outrageous that it'd be happening at any time, let alone 2022. And in many ways, it does show, I think, where we're up to in this country and the need for people who hold strong traditional values, people of Christian faith, but also just strong conservatives as well, to understand that really the job is not going to get done without them being involved in politics anymore. We need to make sure that we're involved and that we're having our say at political level. But look, as to whether or not there's an unlawful dismissal case, I don't know either. It's a complicated area of employment law. I'm certainly not offering a legal opinion either. But all I can say is, given what we know about this and what this says about the place for traditional values and Christians in the AFL community, I absolutely hope there is a case for it, and I wish him well.
And I think AFL members can make their own decision about whether they want to financially support an organisation that perhaps doesn't have much respect for their belief system. Now, I want to ask you about the United Nations. We've had African and Latin American nations support China to prevent the UN Human Rights Council from holding a debate on the human rights abuses being inflicted on the Uyghur Muslims in China. I mean, it was only recently, Alex, that the UN Human Rights Council accused Australia of violating the rights of Torres Strait Islanders by failing to protect them from climate change. Yet when we've got real human rights abuses taking place in China, they don't even want to debate it.
Yeah, and look, the best thing to do here is to cut straight to the chase and call it like it is. The UNHCR is a joke. It is an absolute joke. It's always been a joke. Those are many examples that have come along. And by the way, it's populated by member states, such human rights heavyweights as Bolivia, Pakistan, the Ivory Coast, Russia and the Ukraine, by the way. So imagine getting lectured to by these people, and when there actually are human rights abuses, they're so wholly owned by the Chinese Communist Party that they just back off. I mean, it's time to disband the UNHCR. It might be time to disband the UN, frankly, Rita, I reckon.
Oh, I think that's a very fine idea indeed. You look at what it's achieved and what it hasn't achieved, the human rights abuses it's failed to do anything about, even debate. It really is a shameful organisation much of the time. Now, I want to ask about electric vehicles. They're apparently our future. That's all that's going to be available in a few years' time, we're told. But we know in Florida they've got the Hurricane Ian ripping through the state, and it's causing all sorts of issues with electric vehicles, the risk of exploding due to corrosion caused by water damage. And if Chris Bowen has his way, we'd all be driving around in electric vehicles. And I've had a look at the lifespan of these batteries, never mind hurricanes, just the lifespan of these batteries and the replacement cost. It doesn't make for pretty reading, Alex.
No, it really doesn't, Rita. I remember in my former life, I was sitting on the Adelaide City Council back in 2014, and I was told in no uncertain terms, electric autonomous vehicles are the way of the future. Everything's always the way of the future, isn't it? We're always told by the modelling, that it's all coming. Turns out it wasn't. It was a complete furphy. And why wouldn't it be? If you put aside range anxiety, the fact that you can't actually tow anything like a trailer or anything like that, if you put aside the fact that they're built by minerals that are mined by child labour, if you put aside the fact that you can't recycle them and the replacement costs, and then you throw on top of that the fact that they might explode on you in a fire that you can't put out, it's no wonder that they represent 1.8% of the vehicles sold in this country. I'm surprised it's not less. This is like the last thing you heard on a TED talk is not always the best thing to do in life, Rita. That's the mantra I go by.
And let's not forget, if we all had electric vehicles, what sort of pressure would that put on the electricity grid? And it's fossil fuels that are providing that electricity. So how supposedly green are these cars anyway? It just seems to be so many contradictions and holes in this whole policy. And yet you've got someone like Chris Bowen, who's supposed to be an intelligent adult who's running things these days, just having a massive blind spot when it comes to electric vehicles.
This doesn't make sense. And one person who is an intelligent adult is Michael Schellenberger, who of course was at the CPAC conference this week, or last week, who made that exact point about California, that the actual Californians were told, don't plug in your electric vehicles at the moment, the grid can't take it. Well, there's a little glimmer of things to come for the rest of the West as well, by the way. And if you ever needed more of a wake-up call than that, but these woke councils and these woke Labor Party types and bureaucrats, they're going to force us down this path whether it works or not. Once again, we've got to get involved. We've got to start taking our country back, frankly.
Senator Antic, thank you so much for joining me tonight.